Good evening, everyone. Oh my God. Good evening, everyone. So it's my first visit to the community, mysteriously enough. I've been with Ananda for probably 24 years now, and I've come to Palo Alto, I don't know how many times, the Bay Area, but somehow it just never happened. So it's absolutely wonderful to be here and amongst all of you. I know many of you, but by no means all, and I look forward over the weekend to get to know you better. I'll talk a little bit about myself soon, but just to set the bhav of the evening, it's how many of you here have read Autobiography of a Yogi? That's what I thought. It's never a good idea to ask how many of you here haven't read something because it puts them in a spot. But I knew in this audience I could get away with it, but still. It's AY. I'll just call it AY from now on, partly because people of Indian origin love acronyms. We love it even more than the Pentagon. We just use acronyms all over the place. And it's just a mouthful, so we'll call it AY. It's inspired millions of people across the world since its publication. I think it was in 1946. So we are coming up on almost 80 years now. It's 78 years since it got published. And there has always been, for the past 17, 18 years, there's been a real push, a real desire within Ananda certainly, to bring this into the visual medium. Swamiji certainly, to my knowledge, talked about it as early as 2007, perhaps even earlier than that, I'm not sure, but it's always been waiting to happen. And when you think about it, especially since the pandemic, but even before that, mainly because of all the innovations that happened here in Bay Area, more than any other place in the world. Videos became commonly available and consumable, and now more and more people prefer to get their content through videos. Now that's an obvious reason for AY to adopt that format, but that's just keeping up with the times, and at some point it'll come, but why make it a production, literally? And if so, what form should that take? And when we started tuning into it, a few things became obvious. One is the AY is extraordinarily visually evocative. Perhaps many of you saw it. I paid attention to it in all the various times that I've read it, but I'll share with you a few things as I go along as examples of that. But when you go back and pick up your favorite chapter tonight when you go back and read and look at it from the eyes of a filmmaker, as if you're visualizing it, and it's as if it was written for that. There is every major character in AY has an actual physical description of how they looked. This is actually true. Describing Tiger Swami, the master writes that he had legs the size of trees, and the vast expanse of his chest was topped by a muscular neck, and his biceps were like soccer balls. This is master's description. Can you visualize? And his eyes combined the qualities of a dove and a tiger. This is straight from AY. And I can go on, and later on I will a little bit, but it's extraordinarily visually evocative. In other words, the book is good. Book and video is extraordinary. It's as if it's waiting to be made. Now that's one aspect of why it should be brought to video. There is a little bit more. As many millions have found their spiritual aspiration, it could be master, it could be not, but many people have found an outlet, an explanation for their spiritual aspiration in AY. But the book, for a large number of people, is a little bit big, and unless your mind is used to a certain way of getting information, it's, especially in this day and age, it's a little bit hard to read. But it lends itself very, very well to being filmed. So the way Swamiji talked about it, that there are so many more people are waiting to find Master and waiting to find the teachings of Dwapara Yuga, and then waiting to find the user manual for the age of energy, as I have begun to think about AY, when it becomes a video. So the time is right, and there is, as soon as we started thinking about it, especially in the last 18 months, there is, well, no, not even 18 months, 8 months, forgive me. No. Not that this is important to any of you, but it is to me. About a year. And there is so much energy. It's like, Master's just giving so much energy to this that things are beginning to come together in a way that we certainly couldn't have thought about it. Now, all of you are familiar with how that works. At magnetism, things are just coming together, and super conscious ideas are coming and so on. So it just feels like the time is right. So I just wanted to set that stage, and I'll tell you a little bit more in terms of what's fun and interesting and what approach we should take to making AY. I'll give you a hint of the approach. It is not going to be a biography of Master. So let me put that out there and let you nosh on it while I'll tell you a little bit more. And so I want to tell a little bit about what it is that kind of brought me into this, mostly from the perspective of what would I be able to bring to the table in order to make this into a video. And I offer this just as, and I want to say that this whole satsang, it's a satsang, it's not a class, so just stop at any time. If you have a question, you have a comment, an interjection, an admonition, whatever it might be, or an admission, doesn't matter. Just stop at any time, interrupt me, and we can have a discussion about it. We can talk about it. But my own background, like I said, I came onto the path around almost 24 years ago next month. So it's been a while, and I grew up in when I was growing up, which was in the 70s and the 80s, India was going through a very rapid change. And so it turned out that in my house, my parents and their generation were actually ultra-Orthodox, which is a tradition that stretches back easily 1,000 years, maybe 1,400 years. It was that kind of a Brahmin household. So there was this baggage. I don't mean to say that it's a burden. I just have to say there is a lot of rituals that had both magnetism and a kind of unchangeable nature to them. And I was of the generation that really said, this is all not that useful. I want science instead. And then so I jumped into science. There is a streak of hyper-rationality that has been part of India ever since India became a country. I don't mean it in a bad way or a good way. That's just one of the founding ethos of the nation is it somehow resolved to take a rational approach to things. And you'll see that in the way Master approaches his writings, and I'll have a little more to say about that soon. But so I got into, I did my bachelor's, master's in computer science in a very arcane field of mathematics, in fact. And then I came to Microsoft. I know people in Bay Area don't think about Microsoft, but up in Seattle, we think it's kind of a big deal. Yeah, I know. Sorry. And I worked there for around a total of 15 years on and off. And this ultra-Orthodox background where nothing was changeable and everything had a time span of multiple lifetimes. See, the thing with Hindu rituals is anything's okay, because if you make a mistake, you have another life or 1,000 lives to come back and do it over. A do-over is acceptable for absolutely everything. So there is no sense of immediate urgency because there is no eternal damnation. You see, there is just eternal suffering which you can get out of at any time. So there is a built-in excuse to be lazy for lifetimes together. We give it a different name. We call it karma or predestination, but that's what it amounts to. And then you come to Microsoft, and I cannot tell you the kind of shift that it represented, this ultra-practical, go, 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 everything has to happen yesterday or latest by this afternoon kind of thing. And it really, I personally confronted probably 1,000 years of samskars that resisted it. And it was a bit of a tapasya, as a bit of an internal heat. It built up against it. But as a result, my own, I'll say coping mechanism, but it's more than that. It's probably my dharma. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's my dharma. The coping mechanism is that mentally, I tend to build a bridge because I have my feet in two different conflicting realities. So as a result, my service in Ananda has been as James mentioned, you take something like our yoga techniques, for example, asanas, pranayamas, mudras, and bandhas, and so on. Swamiji has presented it in it's a fully formed product with no hint of where it came from. But it drags behind it a caboose of tradition and intuition and acceptance and magnetism that, if you know where to look, can immediately be extraordinarily uplifting. So if you look at the art and science of Raja Yoga, for example, Swamiji teaches, I think, 11 or 13 pranayamas. And you look at it carefully, some of those are taught in the way that it was probably taught in India 500 years ago. And I mean that in a good way, that their effectiveness is lost when they have been watered down. And that's what we have. That's what Master and Swami have given us. But then there's a little bit of spiritual marketing that needs to be done. You kind of have to say, look, you teach this technique, you say, did it feel good? Oh yeah, it felt really great. Well, do you know, 500 years ago in Sanskrit, they talk about this technique in this way, that for a man that really knows how to do Mahamudra, where is the fear of disease? And it's a direct translation of a Sanskrit text on Mahamudra. Then it brings with it a certain dynamism. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't distill or alter, but connecting it back to its roots, especially when the roots are as ancient as Sanatan Dharma, that's an aspect of bridge building, you see. The other aspect of bridge building, same on the intellectual plane, we have a set of writings from Master and Swami that have so seamlessly melded together the teachings of Vedanta and how they can be found within the teachings of Jesus Christ. And it's such a wonderfully finished product that for people like us who have the samskars to be attracted to them, we see it, we are uplifted, and then we move on spiritually. But there is a bunch of people that when they see it from the eyes of what they are already familiar with, then there are places in the autobiography of a yogi that are direct quotes from the Upanishads. And if you know what to look for, they are right there. And not that it changes anything, but then establishing that bridge is an important thing. And the same thing on the biblical side of things as well. And in fact, tomorrow we'll hear from Hriman on his book, Once and Future Christ, and him and I will both talk about these bridges and reconnecting back. But that's another bridge. And the third one is, there is another aspect to this, that one of the things that distinguishes any ancient culture from the modern ones is the fact that they believe that deep spiritual truths can be conveyed through stories. And you know why that is? Why can't you reason your way to and through spiritual truth? Because the superpower of the intellect is not so much to know the truth. The superpower of the intellect is to recognize untruth. It says, this is not true, this is not true, this is not true, and it holds up to the heart and says, this is what is left, is this true? Because it's the heart that can feel the truth, you see, and we'll talk more, Hriman and I will talk more about this tomorrow, but that's where the stories come from. They speak directly to the heart, short-circuiting the intellect, and that's a good thing. What a thrill it is to look at a story that's familiar to 500 million Indian people and find there directly the teachings of Master. It's literally right there, if you know to look for it. And that's another bridge that can be built. And when you look at what it takes to bring something like AY, make it into a video, AY is first and foremost, primarily, a story. You read AY in different moods, and you see different parts of the truth, right? So it is meant to be a story in this really deep sense of the word. AY for us devotees obviously is scripture, it is Vedanta, it is the gospel. It is that too. And then the centerpiece of AY, the centerpiece of Master's mission when he came to the West was to bring Kriya Yoga. So at its heart is a technique, and this is a technique is called a upaya in Sanskrit. Upaya means a back door. It's a way of getting to something. It's a shortcut, as opposed to upasana. Upasana means the front door. This is where you go full on and do your karma yoga and then do your service and do the self-offering and everything, but every now and then come through the back door and get a direct feel. So it's a upaya, it's a technique. And so the bridges that I talked about, connecting these back to whence they came from on the Sanatana Dharma side on the one hand and on the biblical side on the other hand. So when AY is brought to a visual medium, what is necessary is to build a bridge of a story that combines two great traditions into a modern age where space is obliterated, so there is no longer a need to have Shilohs of this master and that master. You see where I'm going with it? All of this is, think of this as an extended job interview. I just told you why I may be able to contribute a little bit to this. So that's a little bit of my background and what's giving me joy in looking at this project, and even a little bit of what it takes to bring it. These are all the, remember I said that, well, whatever else the AY thing is going to be, the emphasis is not going to be that of the biography of Master. It's going to be, there'll be a timeline, there'll be linearity and this and that, but it'll be something much more. Yes?
Would you say what is the project in a little bit so that all of us can understand?
Yep, that's what I'm going to get to in a moment. I just wanted you all not to be suspicious of me as to why I am speaking about it. But also, you know, I'd love to introduce myself to all of you. It's a bit of a extended introduction as well. So I'll just pause there for a few moments if you have any thoughts or comments. Yes, Keshava, go ahead.
So I'm very intrigued by your preamble about how you'll be picking up the project. I've often thought of what an adaptation of the autobiography might look like. And it has always seemed to me that one of the biggest tripping points of that production would be the temptation or the question of how to represent Master. Because part of the paradox of the book is that he doesn't present himself as a great giant as he is. And so I would love to hear what kind of perspective you're going to take on how you'll present him, what role he'll play in the story, and all those sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, it's, in fact, in many ways, that is the most important question. of this entire project. And in fact, the rest of the satsang will be spent in answering it. But since you asked it, let me give the answer in a capsule format. The first thing is, the trap that we fall into when we talk about biographies is there is a temptation to humanize master. And that he is a guru, he is a master, he is a self-realized being, he is an avatar. And that needs to be one of the pole stars that guide the project. Now, having said that, the aspect of AY, the key aspect of AY is, well, I might as well get into this because you can make AY into a biopic. And you can say on January 5th, 1893, Mukundalal Ghosh was born in Gorakhpur to a high-ranking official of the Bengal-Nagpur Railway. And then 9 months into it, he was found meditating at the famous Gorakhpur temple, and on. And then, 27 years later, he came to America and stayed there for the rest of his life. And you could do that. But how many of you here have seen the movie Gandhi? Okay, for those of you that haven't, it is the movie Gandhi, but it's really not about him. Gandhi is used as a channel to tell the epic story of the birth of a nation. You see what I'm saying? So the fine line that we have to walk is, in telling the life events of Master, who is playing a Leela for us, and we need to make that obvious here and there, we have to tell the epic story of the birth of a new age. That's the whole, it's more and more as me, but I have to say, as much as right now I'm playing a leadership role in the project, the leaders really are Jyotish and Devi, and through them, and directly as well, it's Swamiji, and that way. But having said that, one of the things we all worked through was we have to talk about Dwapara Yoga, and it has to be front and center. And then let me give you a simple example. Chapter 4, Flight to the Himalayas. Now, in that one, what happens is Master schemes with two of his friends, and they take a train to Haridwar from Kolkata. It's in today's literal terms, it's a little bit like taking a train from San Francisco to Seattle. Distance-wise, it's about the same. But this didn't happen now. It happened, I did a timeline calculation, it happened right around 1907. Okay, so Master was about 13, 14 years old. In 1907, think about going from San Francisco to Seattle. It would be a journey. It would be the equivalent of going from, say, San Francisco to Tibet. Okay, in America. In India, it was even more of that. It was perhaps more like taking a SpaceX rocket and going into near-Earth orbit. Really. Now, for a group of 13-year-old boys to go to near-Earth orbit as a spiritual exploration, isn't that talking about Dwapara Yoga? Think about the monumental nature of that particular thing that Master did. So right there, even, in 1979, my grandfather went from Bangalore, which is in south of India, to Badrinath, which is up in the Himalayas. And when he went, in my house, I was very young at the time, in my house, they did the equivalent of his funeral. Because even then, we didn't know if he'd come back. Not because he was old and he might die anytime, he was hale and hearty, it was because going to Badrinath, going to the Himalayas was that much of a big deal in 1979. So you have to think that when Master wrote about Flight to Himalayas, about 3 boys going from Kolkata to Haridwar, he was making a point. Right? It happened in his life, and there are many logistical reasons why he was able to undertake a journey which was beyond the means of most people, most of his contemporaries. But by including that, he was making a point about Dwapara Yuga, because what happens at the end of it? He goes there, he comes back with the full realization. A saint comes to him in Benares and says, you don't need to go to the Himalayas for what you're seeking. So he comes right back. So think of that as, we are coming to an age where you can go anywhere you want, but don't jump in your car, don't jump in your jetpack, don't jump in your spaceship and go. Instead, stay right here. Isn't that a manual of Dwapara Yoga? Do we need to humanize Master to tell that story? Absolutely not. So when we started looking at it, these kind of things began to pop out, and we're really looking at a dimension of AY that I certainly had not tuned into. Okay? So let me pause there. Any thoughts or comments about this?
That sounds great.
Yeah. There's one back there.
I have a feeling I'm way off. I remember watching the series about Buddha. It was produced in India, and it was an incredible series. I mean, I wanted to be a Buddhist after I watched it, and I liked the part after he became enlightened. That was the best part. But I don't think you're talking about having the AY be like that, right? I mean, it was like a series, and it just kind of, I was just left with the feeling. I hardly know the story, but so.
Yeah. Well, we started out by thinking that it is going to be a movie. And then as we started looking at these things, it became very, very obvious that it couldn't be a movie, that it needed a longer treatment. So AY is going to be a series. It is going to be a series. Right now, the plan is to have 3 seasons of around 8 episodes each, around 55 minutes per episode. So we're looking at 1,200 to 1,400 minutes of content. So see what happened. It's a very good question. Once we admitted to the reality that AY is not a biopic but an epic, then we really have to say, well, you really cannot eliminate randomly, say, chapter 22 or chapter 12, things like that, because the nature of the epic is to spread over the transition that it is representing and really explore it from all parts. And different people will have the eyes to see different parts of it. See what I'm saying? So it's exactly, I haven't seen the Buddha series, but I have seen other ones like that. So it is going to be more as faithful to the book in the sense of not abridging it as we can possibly make it. So it's going to be fairly vast and get into all the nuances.
You have to assume Master put each chapter in there for a reason.
Yeah, you see.
You can't just cut.
You can't. And now that we are around four episodes have already been written, and we are beginning to see the reasons that I know many of you have attuned with AY in far deeper ways than I have. So this is probably only a meeting or not, but I'm beginning to see things in there that are so extraordinary. Let me give you another example. So we are kind of geeking out on AY now, and we'll continue to do so. If you have objections to that, I don't know what to say. Just grin and bear it. But there is chapter 5 is the perfume saint, okay, and chapter 6 is Tiger Swami, and then the end of chapter 4 is when Lahiri Mahashai heals a blind man. This is roughly, and all of these chapters have the sense of miracles in them. Now, why did Master write about these things? Well, here is our best guess, that if it is a manual for the age of energy, the moment you admit to a higher reality, that as it says in the Festival of Light, that you're all part of the greater reality, and in the eyes of God all are equal, that matter is just a manifestation of divine energy, and it says in the beginning that for us in this new age, payment has been exchanged for calm acceptance and joy instead of suffering and sorrow, and so on. Once we admit to the reality of energy, then things that might have seemed miraculous become merely technology, right? As soon as we admitted to the reality of electricity, things that were miraculous simply became technology. And go back and carefully read The Perfumed Saint. Master gives a technical explanation of how he was able to produce the perfume. He's saying, you admit to the age of energy, and this is commonplace, no longer a miracle. But then he says, miracles like these are spiritually irresponsible and completely irrelevant for the devotee. That's chapter 5. Chapter 6, Tiger Swami, is a different kind of miracle. That is when you admit that the mind has lordship over the body through the medium of energy that's intelligent and conscious. If it's connected through a manifestation of Divine Mother as Om, which is intelligent and conscious, how can the mind not have overlordship of the body? And therefore, there is a spectacular scene in the book in chapter 6, where imagine Tiger Swami with dove-like and tiger-like qualities in his eyes, with soccer ball-style biceps, with legs as thick as tree trunks, and he's walking along a narrow corridor, and then Master and his friend are walking behind him, and Tiger Swami says the mind is the wielder of muscles, and as he's saying that, he takes his arm and smashes it into the brick and mortar construction of the house, and Master says that the brick fell down and the skylight opened up and they could see dust motes coming through that, okay? And this is superhuman strength. And by the way, footnote, see how visually evocative that was? Can you imagine a poorly lit corridor through which the back of this man's rippling muscles is being shown, and the bicep comes out and then smashes it, and then it gets well lit, and you have the play of light and shadow. It's so easy to represent. This is all near verbatim from the book. I'm not making any of this up. But then he goes into a detailed description. He says, do you want to know how to subdue the tiger? The trick is, and the Master is waiting for a big reveal, and then he says, the trick is to make the tiger think that it's a pussycat. It's like, big whoop, it's like, how do I do that? And then he goes on to say about the power of the will and of the mind. This is chapter 6 for a reason, because this is a miracle of a different level, because how does chapter 6 end? Tiger Swami finds his guru who says, come, let me help you tame the powerful beasts that roam in the forests of your mind, or words to that effect. So it is saying mind is so powerful that it can make your body do near miracles, but you got to deploy that miracle inwardly. But the stage has been set in chapter 4, where the highest of these miracles is Lahiri healing Ramu, not because he gave sight to a blind man. Here is how that little scene progresses. So Shastri Mahashai is narrating this to Master. And remember, Master's just run away to Himalayas. He's come back. His poor father has said, I'm going to appoint you a Sanskrit tutor so you do well in school. It turns out that the Sanskrit tutor was a disciple of Lahiri Mahashai. So Master and Shastri Mahashai just spent time meditating together and hearing stories. So much for parental concern. It's the modern equivalent of the child watching YouTube videos in the bedroom while they're supposed to be doing homework. And so Shastri Mahashai says, let me tell you a miracle that I just witnessed. And it's this blind disciple named Ramu, and his job is to stand behind Lahiri Mahashai. He's blind, and he waves the fan to keep the master cool, because it is Benares in summer. And Shastri Mahashai says, why don't you ask the master to give you sight? And Ramu says, no. He says, no, it's okay. The master is very compassionate. Go ask him. And then he goes and asks Lahiri Mahashai. And Lahiri Mahashai says, my son, somebody must have given you the wrong information. I have no such powers. I cannot heal you. But Ramu is smart. He says, sir, but the Lord within you has all the powers, doesn't he? And Lahiri says, now that I cannot deny. It is how does he say it? The Lord that the Lord that provides light to the entire universe, can he not provide light to your sightless eyes? And then he touches Ramu, the point between the eyebrows, and then he says, chant Shri Ram Jai Ram for the next 7 days, and then your sight will be restored. Imagine what a dramatic moment this is, how you could show this. But then the larger point in terms of what you said is, how can you leave something out? Why did Master write it? Well, there are 3 kinds of miracles. One is the spiritually irrelevant kind, where you produce the scent of a rose. It's really, it's like, it's just technology. The other one is a significantly more powerful cosmic force that has been wrongfully deployed for outward achievements. Instead, bring the same willpower inward. But the highest miracle is forsaking all other dharmas, surrender to God. And as Krishna says, I will free you of all your sins, do not grieve. That be a channel, and that's the highest miracle. Wouldn't that form a wonderful episode? That in the age of Dwapara, imagine reading AY 200 years from now, where such things might be more commonplace as humankind has figured out what Dwapara really means. Isn't this a user's manual? Master in chapter 5 says this is irresponsible, so don't go to that college which only teaches how to make sense. Instead, go to this college, Living Wisdom School, circa 2224, that's going to teach you these new things. You see what I'm saying? So things like this are kind of really popping up. So, and these are, well, let me pause there and see if there are any thoughts or comments. Yes? Yes.
So I'm wondering if, I love this sounds marvelous. Would you consider, for example, taking the story of the perfuming saint and having it told from the viewpoint of the perfuming saint, or from Ramu's point of view, having the story told that way? What I'm thinking of is, there's a wonderful episode I know many of us have seen, or a series called The Chosen. And one of the powerful things about The Chosen is that you are seeing the story told through the eyes and through the words of the disciples.
Yeah. Well, in this particular case, it doesn't feel like it. We don't know. And what you said is extremely valuable for us to expand our mind into. So the short answer is, I don't know. As written, it is the narrator continues to be master. It is seen from his eyes, but that might change. But that brings to mind a larger point that, in any story, it is always said through the eyes of, there is some narrator, either explicit or implied. That's the nature of all stories, because it's always someone's viewpoint that you are representing. Stories are not written in passive voice, they tend to be in active voice. So it's somebody's voice. And there is I'm trying to see whether I want to take this detour. I will, because it's very, very interesting. The story of Mahabharata, okay? Let me ask you a question. Who narrates the story of Mahabharata? Vyasa? Well, there is almost no place where very few places where Vyasa says, I saw this, I saw that. Okay, Keshava, go for it. 4 people. You said 4 people?
It's like someone telling a story. Yeah. I don't remember their names. I'm sorry.
Does that sound right to you all? It sounds very stilted to me. Yes, Sai Ganesh is nodding. Sanjaya tells the story. Okay, that's a famous one. Well, it's exactly as Keshava said. Here is how Mahabharata is narrated. I'll break out the layers for you. There is a gathering of many rishis somewhere about 200 kilometers north of Delhi at those times. And some people have just come from a pilgrimage, and his name is Suta. So they asked Suta, okay, I just heard that there was a gigantic sacrifice, a great yajna that was performed. Will you tell us what was in the yajna? And then Suta begins to say, oh yes, you cannot believe what a great yajna it was. In the yajna, there was Yudhishthira's grandson. He was performing the yajna. And therefore, Yudhishthira's grandson asked the following question to who? Vyasa's disciple. His name is Shuka. We don't need to keep track of names. I'm inserting names just to make it confusing for all of you to illustrate the complex narrative structure here. So he says, Janamejaya asked Shuka, please tell me a little bit about my grandfather. And then Shuka begins to narrate, and these guys in the forest say, okay, Suta, what did they say? I'm a little bit confused. In the meantime, Janamejaya says, Shuka, what happened here? I'm a little bit confused. And then Shuka begins to narrate. And then he says, I saw this, I saw that, and then comes the narrative viewpoint. Arjuna says something, Krishna says something, Subhadra says something, Draupadi says something. So that's the 3rd level. And then the 4th level is...
Who was saying the 3rd level? Who was narrating the 3rd level?
Whomever the individual characters is. Sometimes it's Arjuna, sometimes it's Draupadi. There is a conversation between Draupadi and Yudhishthira where Draupadi tells a story of how she was humiliated by someone. And then Janamejaya here says, okay, Shuka, hold on a second. Who was that someone? Why did he do this thing? And then up in the forest, they say, okay, Suta, I didn't get it. Go back four chapters before and tell me something. And then when it comes to the war, it gets even more confusing because then Sanjaya tells the blind king Dhritarashtra, this is what happened. Dhritarashtra says, what happened? And Janamejaya asks, hang on, I didn't get this. And then, so who asked the question about viewpoints? So now Master doesn't say 4 different levels, but how many times in the AY have we seen Master asking a question and then Shastri Mahashaya saying, I saw Lahiri do this, and then Lahiri speaks, and sometimes Sri Yukteswar doing this, and then Sri Yukteswar speaks, and Sri Yukteswar speaks to Lahiri in the story that he's telling in response to Master's question, and then comes back, and then very famously he tells Master about his meeting with Babaji and the conversation with Babaji and Sri Yukteswar in the Kumbh Mela, and then comes right back, 2 frames, popping up 2 frames, and then saying, my son, that disciple that Babaji sent was you. So the working assumption that we are going with is narrative viewpoints are incorporated in AY for a reason. Now, for pacing and other reasons, if it needs to change, we might. But see, the Chosen needs to invent a narrative viewpoint, because the Bible is not a story. You see what I'm saying? But we have a story, so we got to be careful. It's one of those, what Swamiji said about editing but not changing. So there is a lot of that that's coming through, and we're really grateful for how much Swami has guided us on that, at how to tune into this. But all 3 questions, these are really good, though. You guys have tuned into some of the most key issues that we are having to deal with. Okay, any other thoughts on this?
I want to see it. I'm ready.
Well, I'm going to read for you in about 10-15 minutes one of the scenes. It's its first public debut ever. Okay, now here is another aspect of AY, which is, and this will conclude my overall thing about this, is AY is written at a time and a place which has a lot of meaning. And it is much of AY, probably until chapter 41, I think, or 39 or something, probably 41, when Master comes to America. Given that there are 49 chapters, you'd say so roughly 80% of AY is set in India between 1893 and 1920 in a fairly small geographic region, which is today's West Bengal. It doesn't matter where the region is, but it's very important to tune into the bhav of that region and what was happening at that time. We are taught in Western history that if you look back and look at the key places, key events, we say, well, there were the Dark Ages. I won't go beyond the Dark Ages. And then the burghers of Florence in the 12th century or 13th century, whatever, they decided that the church should not be in charge of education, but then they had no other syllabus, so they said, let me look back to see what the Romans and the Greeks did, and then they started teaching their kids differently. And this was such a monumental achievement that it led to an extraordinary flowering of creativity and art and all kinds of other things that hadn't been seen for 800 years. We call this the Renaissance. A natural outgrowth of Renaissance, which was a change in education system, mind you. That's kind of where I'm oversimplifying it, but it's still not factually inaccurate. The result of that was a questioning of who controls my access to God. And then say, well, that's not the Catholic Church. In fact, here are 92 reasons why they shouldn't control it. These were the 92 set of grievances that Martin Luther wrote. At the time, Renaissance and the printing press led to Reformation, meaning a question of the spiritual roots of the West began in earnest. And that led, not so much directly, but there's certainly a large degree of causation to the Age of Enlightenment. And part of that Baroque period was the fact that humanity began to take an empirical examination of the universe and said, kind of all the things that we are able to determine with our heads, let's do that. So it was a age of rationalism, and that led to toolism, meaning industrial revolution. Eventually, it led to the first mechanized war, which is the First World War, which led to the concept of the modern nation state. So you think about reinvention of education, revitalization of religion, transformation from agrarian societies to an industrial society, and redefinition of nationhood. In the West, that took approximately 700 years, give or take. And Renaissance had as its epicenter Italy. Reformation had as its epicenter Germany. Enlightenment, I hope there are not many people from continental Europe here, I'm going to say, has as its epicenter England. And then industrial, I don't know, Netherlands, England, a little bit more of Europe, but still, at least. So it kind of moved around over a period of 800 years. And here's what's extraordinary about the time period that AY was written. Starting from around 1860 to around 1947, in that period of around 90 years, India went through its equivalent of Renaissance, its equivalent of Reformation, its equivalent of industrialization, and the founding of the nationhood. All of this happened. And where did this happen? Within, literally, I'm not making this up, within 60 miles radius of where AY was written. That is the zeitgeist. That is where AY was written. So think about what Master was writing about. That it's in ancient people were re-educating themselves, revitalizing nothing less than Sanatan Dharma, dealing with the Dwapara Yuga inevitability of industrialization, and recapturing their centuries of oppression in terms of founding of a nation, which the Mahatma Gandhi was at the center of. And Master was writing a manual of how to think about it spiritually at that time. So when you read about things in the AY, it's hard for us to appreciate the monumental nature of, in the Indian subcontinent has always had roughly 18 to 20% of world's population throughout, say, the last 2,000 years. So, and it is true today, and it was true back then. So about 1/5 of the world was going through an accelerated process of rediscovery, at the heart of which lay the arrival of Dwapara Yuga. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's the setting of the first 41 chapters of AY. And it's very important to tune into that to get the sense. So we realized fairly early on that AY is a period piece. Not period piece like Downton Abbey wearing the costumes, it is that too. But it's a period piece in the sense of capturing the excitement and the confusion of the age. It's like the old Confucian thing which says, may you live in interesting times, that curse. It's capturing that. And this leads me to what is perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of AY. Imagine writing about these times and all the chaos and all the sense of displacement that one might have felt, not unlike what we might feel now, except perhaps it was even more. But no less than two or three famines happened to this land during the time that Master was writing AY, causing many millions of deaths, and so many extraordinary things happened, uplifting things happened. But what is the tone of AY? The tone of AY is childlike in its innocence, is it not? Why is Master writing about it? It's like writing a children's book to capture the essence of the times that we are in. Does that even make sense? Does it even represent the times that we are in? And what he's saying is, it does. That when you see the hand of God, you see the hand of Divine Mother behind all events, no matter how big and small, the outcome, the eventual outcome, it might take faster or slower karmic trajectories to get there, but the outcome is nothing short of eternal joy. So the innocence of AY is not so much the gullibility of a child, but it's the security that comes when you take a God's eye view of what is happening. Isn't that a manual for our age? This is one of the first things that Jyotishan Devi said is, the sense of hope that is in AY has to come across. And when you think about it this way, what better time can there be to bring AY to the visual medium? That with all the things that the world is going through, the protectionism, moving back into our tribal identities or whatever, I won't go too much, it's too depressing. But AY is the message of hope picked up from the highest possible thread. Not a pseudo message of hope, not a Pollyanna, not a silver bullet, but picked up from the thread that it truly is the destiny of everybody. You see what I'm saying? Now, whether it comes out this way or not is up to Master, but mostly why I'm saying all of these is to convey a sense of the wonder that we all that are involved in the project are feeling as we are looking at this and trying to bring it into the visual medium. Yes, go ahead.
At a pragmatic level, I think since The Chosen was mentioned, I think it's a mystery to many people why some movies make it and others don't. Same with series. I find very interesting that The Chosen was such a success, given that it was made by a small studio and very true, at least to the director's vision. In other words, it didn't sacrifice its soul for commercial success. It's very clear you don't want to sacrifice the soul of the book, obviously. But the advantage The Chosen has is that it talks about Jesus, a figure most people know around the world. And what are your thoughts about making this series a commercial success while preserving its integrity?
Yeah.
And ideally making it as successful as The Chosen, with the disadvantage that we don't have the figure of,
Yeah.
the figure is less known than Jesus.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great question. So let me we are specifically not holding Chosen as a model, mostly because Master has something to narrate, and I don't know whether Chosen sold their soul or didn't, and it's certainly not up to me to say it one way or another, but we certainly won't. But within that, what the success of anything really comes down to three specific things. One is, now I'm speaking primarily as a storyteller. People need to root for something. Okay, that's how any story is. If your heart is not saying, is this going to happen, isn't this going to happen, then there is no story. And there are plenty of places in the AY when you start looking at it, where there is so much of that narrative tension. It's just right there. So I don't think it'll be that hard to build that kind of vesting. You know, people's hearts are vested in it. I don't think it's that hard to build. That's one thing. The second one, which is far trickier, is pacing. How quickly does it need to move? And Chosen's really nailed it. The pacing is impeccable, and we are very aware of the pacing in AY. We need to get it right. And there is, whether we know it or not, chapters have certain cliffhangers in AY, and we kind of need to be, for the, not so much cliffhangers, but the, you know how when you tell stories to children, you repeat certain things again, and children like to hear it, and we think we outgrow that. Well, we don't. And the official term given to this in the storytelling business is a motif, that it's a theme that repeats itself. And some of those are very, very powerful in AY. If you read the first few chapters, every time somebody is in any trouble, Lahari Mahashai comes to the rescue. It happens again and again and again. To give you one small example, when Master's mother, Gyana Prabha, is pregnant with Master, and she has become a disciple of Lahiri Mahashai, along with Master's father, Bhagavati Charan Ghosh. And then Lahiri comes as if it's a miraculous appearance of Lahiri in that open field, and says, "Why are you being so harsh?" And then they go to Lahiri, and Lahiri looks at Master's mother and says, "I am so happy that you are here, because the child that's growing in your womb is going to transform the lives of many people." And then there are a few other miracles that happen along the way. And then when in the birthing room, which is in an upstairs room of Garpur Road, not Garpur Road, back in Gorakhpur, on the day of, on January 5th, Master's mother is in real trouble. It's unclear. Her labor pains are so great, she cannot bear it anymore. And then in the throes of that, she appeals to Lahiri Mahashai. And it's the photo. It's always, the motif here is always Lahiri Mahashai's photo. She appeals to him, and then a great light comes out of Lahiri Mahashai's photo and envelops the whole room. And instantly, her labor pains are gone. And with the birthing room bathed in the soft light coming out of this very photo that we have, it is into that light that Master comes into this world. And every time Lahiri Mahashai comes in the initial chapter, there is something like this that happens. The power of this motif, if we did our jobs right, is it just gets directly to the heart. Because see, it's a message of hope. So that's just one example. There are humorous moments in AY that is so many. I don't have time to go into it now, but there is a very humorous moment minutes before Master meets Sri Yukteswar. So if you go back home and read chapter 10, see if you can spot that humorous moment and how humorous that is. So where I'm going with it is there is enough narrative richness here that keeping people's interest, at least from the way Master has written, shouldn't be an issue. Now, whether we will be open enough to receive that grace and do a good job, we need all of your prayers for it. But that's the best answer I can give you right now. Yes.
Hearing you talking about this answer, it makes me, I feel like you have a soul call to make this movie. A soul call to make this movie. What happened with that movie doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the masters.
Sorry, no, there's a little bit too much disturbance. Would you repeat it, please?
Maybe I should just talk about
No, I got most of the question.
What I sense for you is like you have a soul call to make this movie.
Right.
What happened after or during or in between making this project, it's really up to the masters.
Yeah.
It's just how many people it reach, where does it go, how does it go. It doesn't belong to you, to us, to Ananda.
That's not our business. You're exactly right.
It's just between the masters.
Yeah. No, that's very well put. And it's really, you said it so well that doing something like this is a calling, but what comes out of it is really up to Master. You know, he has brought Ananda as an organization and some of us as channels for making this happen. But it's really his project. And I really like the way you said it. And that's, sometimes I was sharing with Freeman yesterday that if any of us, not just me, but the other people that are involved in it, if we think that it is our job, that's a slippery slope. And the burden is really quite a bit, because it really isn't. We are channels, but it's really the magnetism of all of us that will make the right thing happen. And the Master certainly has some plan for this. And I don't think it's an accident that the pandemic made everybody aware of the power of the visual medium. And even though this project has been contemplated for 17 years, that suddenly now there is energy behind it. So it's certainly a soul call for me. It's certainly a soul call for the others that are working on it. But what happens is Master's business. So thank you for that. That was very well said.
I think I might be saying the same thing in a different way that Esther was talking about. Well, I read the AY for the second time when I was 59, 14 years ago. And I had read it when I was in my 20s, and I don't know what happened. But anyway, I was compelled to go to the computer and find an organization that was focused around Yogananda after reading just several chapters. And I'm imagining that this video is going to be, I mean, I have no idea why. And I hardly understand what you're talking about. You know, it's just like going over my head. I'll listen to the video again. Maybe I'll get more insight. But anyway, I'm just imagining that this video is going to affect people on a level, you know, that we can't even imagine. It's just like reading the AY and not really knowing why you do the next thing after you read it.
Yeah, it's certainly that must be part of, just like the book, it's going to reach people in ways that we wouldn't know. It's very true.
Really. I think in all of us, there's always a concern to try and make the thing work, to have it reach millions of people, let's say. And I'm gratified. I feel in you, it's not likely that you will be seduced by that and get off the beam of what Master wants you to do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's tempting to try and we need to get a return on the money that's spent, or we need 100,000 people to buy it, and resisting that temptation is often not easy.
Yeah.
But I'm gratified to hear you speak about it. I feel like you'll be able to succeed.
But I hope so. This is one of the first pieces of guidance that Jyotishan Devi gave us, and Pia, the devotee in India who is really holding up this project, they all gave very strong guidance along these lines that it really is we shouldn't dilute anything in pursuit of ratings. And it will reach, I'm paraphrasing what Jyotish Devi said and what Pia also said, that in the end, it'll reach whom it'll reach. With eyes to hear, eyes to see and ears to hear. But the larger thing here is to stay true to what AY is. And so, multiple sets of eyes will be looking at it with definitely this particular guidance in mind. And I'm very, very aware of it myself as well, as is Pia. Okay, go ahead.
Well, my question is based off of what Esther said. What have you been doing personally to attune to Master's will for this project and get yourself or get all the expectations out of the way so what really needs to flow through is flowing through?
Yeah. A few things I've been doing, and one will be obvious and the other one not so much. The one I'm doing that's obvious is I have a thing where I work on this usually most mornings, and regardless of my sadhana, when I start working, I start with a meditation. Sometimes it'll be a reasonably long meditation, just so that it's just a thing that you can feel in your mind when there is more of you in the project versus when there isn't. Now, of course, spiritually, I have a long way to go before it becomes all the time, but certainly that's one attempt that I'm making. But the other one, which is helping me a lot, and I was sharing this with Sriman yesterday, is actually leaning into the non-AY activities that I do in Seattle. In a thing like this, there is a temptation to do this to the exclusion of everything else. And it took me about 2 months to realize that there is no way to tune into inspiration by doing that. And so, I'm still doing YTT or Sunday service or all the other things, less so, sometimes significantly less so, but doing that actually is turning out to be one of the biggest ways of being attuned. And looking back, it's an obvious thing that, attunement comes before expression of it. But doing the day-to-day center work is actually helping me a lot. So I'm doing those and also privately working on some of the harmful habits I know that I have, and kind of I'm working on it with extra diligence. Those are the three, no more. But one thing I do want to say, though, is just tuning into the AY and writing a little script around it, I always found that it felt very happy inside, for no reason. Not relief that I'm done with writing an episode, but for several days there was just this happiness. And I was talking to Hriman and Padma about this, and Padma said that she had taken a seclusion with around 300 of Swamiji's emails because she's writing a book. And she said during that seclusion, many of the emails were things like, well, when is our next meeting going to be? Has something been decided on the publication of this book? And she said she felt a joy at the end of it. And then she said it was because by being with Swami's email, she was attuned to Swami's consciousness. See, so she said, by working on AY, you are attuned to Master's consciousness. So I actually find that in many ways, just working on that is its own preparation. I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess those are a few things I'm doing. Okay. Okay.
You write the episodes, or what?
I do.
What do you? What is your total role in there? Writing the episode is some. What else do you do?
Right now, I am. See, in a production like this, there is the creative side of things and there is the operational side of things. Right now, I am in charge of all of the creative side of things. So, writing the episode, but also what might be the setting. While I don't pick the music, I have a suggestion of what kind of music would be appropriate for something like this. And some of the scenes, visually what it would look like, this would fall in what's traditionally called production design. What kind of shoes would Master be wearing when he did this? And all of these have bearing on how people receive it. So it's more than scripting, but it's also scripting.
So how many episodes are now primary cast is done?
We've written 4 episodes, which would be probably 1/2 of all the episodes in the first season.
So the production will start, means the acting and everything?
Hard to say. Let me not speculate on it, but it's at least a year away. At least.
And when it will come, it's also not known.
It's even more of a speculation, so I won't even bother.
And you're going to read us?
Exactly.
Yeah, I wanted to read for you just a 3-minute snippet. And this is the first scene of the first episode of the first season. So, and none of this is set in stone. It will go through multiple iterations. But AY, of course, starts the first sentence of the first chapter of the book. The characteristic features of Indian culture have long been a search for the ultimate verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. That's how it starts. We start a little bit differently. And I want to set the stage for you. Master is an avatar. Now, the appearance of an avatar is not a random event, even though it might seem like it, and certainly the way Master describes it, that, he was born tra-la-la-la-la, and then, but then the appearance of an avatar is always carefully stewarded and planned by God and gurus. Did such a planning happen in Master's case? Of course it did. There are many, many such. I already told you one where the light of Lahiri Mahashai was there in the labor room. Did you know that Master's mother and father, you know now because I said it just a few minutes ago, but I'll remind you that Master's mother and father received Kriya initiation when Master was in the womb of his mother, not until then. Wasn't that a preparation? Here is another thing you may or may not know. When Master was in the womb, Master is a devotee of Divine Mother. In Indian households, there's always a god, a form of God that you worship. Who was the Ishta Devata? Who was the form of God that Master's parents worshipped for the past 600 years of their ancient household? It was Vishnu in the form of Narayana in a special stone called Saligram. Okay? This is written in Mejta. And one night, when Gyanaprabha Ghosh was pregnant with Master, she has a vision of Durga in the puja room of their ancestral home. The vision is so compelling, and she knows that this totally is not true because there is no Durga. She goes, does puja there whenever she's there, that she goes upstairs to the puja room, and then she finds in a crack in the wall, there is a murti of Durga. And so then she goes down and wakes up her husband and say, come on, stop sleeping. And then he goes and then he calls the family priest and he says, from this point on, in our house, along with Vishnu, Durga needs to be worshipped. So Divine Mother comes into Master's house before he arrives. And I just gave you 2 examples. There are others. Here is another one. Okay? So, okay. So this is episode 1, A Yogi is Born. And I'm going to read for you more than the script. I'm going to set up the scene for each of you, so please visualize what I'm going to read. Camera shows the view of the Badrinath temple. It coming in from the above and the left bank of the Alakananda river. It descends into the river level, zooms in on the hundreds of devotees crossing the bridge to the ancient Badrinath temple. The chant of Om Namo Narayana resounds through the valley. The camera rises up to show the Nilakant peak and upriver to show the forbidding crags of Chaukamba and Satopant peaks. The voiceover says, the northern Himalayan crags near Badrinarayan are still blessed by the living presence of Babaji. The camera descends swiftly to the glacial Satopant lake where Babaji is shown seated with his bamboo staff next to him. The bamboo staff is called a danda. He bears a strong resemblance to Lahiri Mahashai, although the audience doesn't know it at this time, Lahiri Mahashai, because Lahiri Mahashai has not yet been introduced. Around Babaji are seated 5 disciples. 2 are obviously American. They are seated around a homakund, a sacrificial fire pit, and Babaji is shown pouring ghee into the fire. The voiceover continues. The secluded master has retained his physical form for centuries, perhaps for millenniums. The deathless Babaji is an avatara, a descent of divinity into flesh. Babaji's mission in India has been to assist the prophets carry out their special dispensations. Babaji veils himself from the public gaze and has the power to become invisible at will. As this voiceover is happening, Babaji makes the final offering. Mrityor mokshiyam amritat swaha, he says, repeating the last words of the Mahamrityunjaya mantra. He gets up smoothly, picking up his danda, the bamboo staff, and he says, in a voice that rings and echoes across the remote valley, Dhera danda uthao, which means fold up the tent and pick up the staff. And the group vanishes. The camera lingers momentarily on the tranquil glacial lake with a view of the distant Badrinarayan temple. The scene shifts to Allahabad. It is early morning and it is the day of the Kumbh Mela. A tall Ashwatha tree is seen with a circular stone platform around its base. Babaji and his entourage appear suddenly there. Babaji is seated on the platform with his staff next to him. His entourage sits in a circle on the ground beneath the platform. The camera zooms out to display the hustle of the 1894 Maha Kumbh Mela. We see Sri Yukteswar walking among the crowds. He's around 40 years. He's tall, neither slender nor stocky, with a flowing beard and a leonine face. He radiates health and vitality. He's looking slightly dazed by the clamor and surge of the crowds. As he passes by a bridge on the Ganga River, he sees an acquaintance standing nearby, his begging bowl extended. Looking around with obvious disillusionment, Sri Yukteswar. Oh, the Kumbh Mela is nothing but a chaos of noise and beggars. I wonder if Western scientists working for the practical good of mankind are not more pleasing to God than these idlers. A tall sannyasi walks up to him. Tall sannyasi, sir, a saint is calling you. Who is he? Come, see for yourself. The sannyasi turns and walks briskly away. Sri Yukteswar hesitatingly at first, then with surer steps follows. The quiet inner power of his walk ensures that people make way for him automatically. It's not the swagger born of ego, but a power coming from within. Sri Yukteswar approaches the tree. Babaji gets up and embraces him. There's a halo around Babaji, which is slightly luminous, and when viewed through the halo, the scenery appears slightly distorted. The overall effect is a gently shimmering nimbus around him as he walks. His eyes are shining. In a ringing but normal pitched voice, Babaji, welcome Swamiji. Sir, I am not a Swami. Those on whom I am divinely guided to bestow the title of a Swami never cast it off. Sri Yukteswar bows at the feet of Babaji and he lingers there, clasping the perfect holy feet with his hands. The camera zooms in on Babaji's flawless feet, and Sri Yukteswar's face and eyes are shown with tears streaming down them. Babaji places both his palms on Sri Yukteswar's hand. Blessing him, Sri Yukteswar stands up and Babaji motions him to a seat under the tree. The camera shows the face of Babaji with Sri Yukteswar's profile, from shoulders up to the face. What do you think of Kumbh Mela? Sri Yukteswar. I was greatly disappointed, sir. Somehow the saints and this commotion don't belong together. Child, for the faults of the many, judge not the whole. The Mela is blessed with men of God realization. Nodding in agreement. Sir, the scientific men of the West are greater by far in intelligence and high in intellectual attainments. But they are wedded to rank materialism. Others, famous in science and philosophy, do not recognize the essential unity in religion. They are ignorant of the real values of melas such as these. These barriers threaten to separate them from us forever. I feel the pangs of your heart, which is broad enough for all men, whether east or west. That is why I summoned you here. East and West must establish a golden middle path of activity and spirituality combined. India has much to learn from the West in material development, and India can teach the West the ancient and universal methods of yogic science. Camera zooms in on Babaji's face, and he speaks with quiet intensity. The vibrations of many spiritually minded, spiritually seeking souls in the West come flood-like to me. I perceive potential saints in America and Europe waiting to be awakened. There is a short pause as dramatic music plays. Camera zooms in on Babaji's lips. His voice now has a resonant, space-filling quality. In a few years, I will send you a disciple. You will know him as Mukundalal Ghosh. You will train him for disseminating yoga in the West. Bless him with penetrating sunshine of your wisdom, that he may have the power to awaken these potential saints from the fitful sleep of ignorance. He will be known in the world as Paramhansa Yogananda. Babaji's hands lift in benediction. Dera Danda Uthao, his voice rings across the crowded banks of the holy river. The saintly group vanishes, and Sri Yukteswar is shown with his head bowed. So that's the first 2 or 3 minutes. And 90% of the conversation I read are verbatim from AY. 90%. I just did a few changes here and there. Oh. Okay. Well, thank you, friends. It's wonderful very inspiring for me to share this time with you.